You're listening to The Drag.
The story you're about to hear contains brief mentions of physical violence that are gruesome and disturbing in nature. Please keep this in mind as you continue to listen to this podcast. It's 6:45 a.m. on March 2nd, 2018 in Austin, Texas. Sean Phillips gets out of bed and wakes up his children, ages 6 and 8. He heads downstairs and sinks back into his living room couch, waiting for them to get ready before he drives them to elementary school. He's in his early 40s and has 3 piercings on his nose alone and tattoos that crawl from his toes to his temples. His look can be intimidating. Once, a bar even refused him entry because of it. But if you look closer, his eyes reveal the gentle father he is at home. His hair hangs past his shoulders, but it's usually swept up into a ponytail or bun for convenience. Sometimes it's his natural tone of ashy brown, and sometimes it's dyed bright colors. He works as a body piercer, which kind of explains things, and his wife is a tattoo artist. Despite their edgy, outward appearance, they live a pretty low-key lifestyle with their son and daughter in a 2-story brick home. Sean sits on his couch in the living room. It's 6:50 a.m., and he's waiting for his kids to come downstairs when he hears a loud boom. He sprints outside, mind spinning. He looks for the source of the noise and is met with a sight he'll never forget. Next door, his neighbor, Stephan House, who goes by Stephan, stands in his front doorway. He'd stepped outside to have a cigarette, like he does every morning. He's a 39-year-old black man who lives with his wife and daughter. Sean and Stephan know each other. Their daughters are friends. But the neighbors aren't standing on their porches to say good morning over a cup of coffee. Instead, Sean sees his neighbor covered in blood, shrapnel lodged throughout his body. His hands look as if they've been nearly blown off, and a gash separates the lower part of his face. Weeks later, in a lengthy Facebook post, Sean will write that it looks like Stephan had been hit by an axe. Stephan's eyes are open, but glazed over. He turns his head towards Sean, then collapses.
911, do you need
Hey, I don't know what's going on. My neighbor, something exploded or something. There's blood everywhere. We need an ambulance immediately.
Sean can't tell if Stephan is breathing. He rushes to his side and delivers 1, then 2 rescue breaths. He knows chest compressions could help save Stephan's life, but one look at his chest and he's forced to change his mind. There's too much damage, too much shrapnel. Chest compressions could do even more harm to Stephan's already lacerated body. Stephan gasps. The rescue breaths worked, at least a little bit. Sean screams his neighbor's name, to no response.
Is he breathing? Yeah, he's definitely breathing.
He is breathing. Okay, good. Now I want you to look at him. I want you to say now every single time he takes a breath in, starting immediately.
Now.
Keep going.
Okay, stop.
Has he took another breath or not?
Now.
Okay, keep going. Every single breath tell me so we make sure he's breathing enough.
Now.
Keep going. Do not stop.
Now.
Keep going.
Now.
Keep going.
Now.
More of Sean and Stephan's neighbors make their way outside. And it's chaos. Everyone's on the street. One neighbor rushes inside Stephan's house to make sure nothing is on fire. Another tends to Stephan's 8-year-old daughter, who is screaming, "My daddy's dead. My daddy's dead."
It sounded like, sir, hold on. It sounded like an explosion, but what actually happened was your neighbor fell down?
I don't know what happened, ma'am. I do not know. I have no idea. His daughter's hysterical. He's on the ground with blood. I heard the explosion. There's a smoke alarm. There's blood everywhere.
You're listening to Season 2 of Darkness. I'm Ashley Miznazi. This is the story of the Austin serial bombings of 2018, when a man terrorized the city over the course of 19 days. These 6 episodes will give you a closer look at the chaos that surrounded Austin and how the bombings changed lives and exacerbated racial wounds, all against the backdrop of Austin's biggest festival of the year. Back in Stephan's neighborhood, emergency services have arrived at the scene of the explosion. As medics rush to the front porch, Sean positions Stephan to keep him from drowning in his own blood. The first medic on scene looks at Stephan and asks, "Is he even alive?" To which Sean replies, "Yes, he's breathing. Now, why don't you keep it that way?" Minutes ago, Sean and Stephan were just being fathers to their children, getting them ready for school and probably already looking forward to picking them up at the end of the day. Now, in a blink of an eye, they're both covered in blood, and one is being carried into an ambulance.
Adam 26, Medic 29, transporting, CPR still in progress.
Law enforcement officers evacuate the surrounding homes. Police tape blocks both sidewalks along the street. Nobody can get in or out. By now, local news reporters have descended on the scene, and even more investigators continue to file in.
This looks like a pipe bomb or something. Yeah, there's shrapnel everywhere.
Then, as medics rush his neighbor to the hospital, Sean remembers his morning isn't over. He still needs to take his children to school, and luckily there's just enough time. As they leave in the car, Sean explains their neighbor was in a bad accident. He keeps it vague, not to alarm his children, but he hasn't realized there's blood covering his clothes. He's in shock. He tells his daughter that she should make a card for Stephan's daughter because she's going to need her support. She's just been through something awful. Sean reassures his daughter that he thinks Stephan's going to be okay, but neither of them know if he's telling the truth. At the hospital, the ambulance doors swing open. As doctors rush Stephan to an operating room to save his life, the Austin Police Department bomb squad secures everything within a meter of Stephan. His clothes, the ambulance, even the hospital hallway. Bomb technicians are gathering evidence from Stephan's body. They're looking for information about the shrapnel to relay back to investigators at Stephan's house, and they're worried there might be undetonated bombs at the scene. Nobody knows if this was an accident or something more sinister.
A package exploded. I mean, I have no doubt about it. There's cardboard box pieces, and there's shrapnel all over the place, like screws, staples. Yeah, like it was a pipe bomb or something that was in the package.
Brian Manley works in his office at police headquarters in downtown Austin. For just over a year, he's been the interim chief of the Austin Police Department since the previous chief left the job for the same role in Houston. The city outside his window is a place Manley has called home since he was a boy. Before he moved to Austin, his family shuffled between Texas and New Jersey. He joined the Austin Police Department in 1991, a decision he made as a teenager after taking a law enforcement class at Johnston High School. He started as a patrol officer, and after more than 25 years of service, he'd made his way to the top office at APD. As he sits in his office, he answers emails left over from last night. He prepares for today's meetings. Then, he gets news of the explosion.
Typically living in a city setting like this, when you hear of an explosion, the first things that come to mind is, a water heater explosion or someone maybe using a torch or something too close to a combustible. You don't think about an IED, an explosive device. It's just not something we've seen in our community before to any great extent, and really across the country.
Explosions don't happen often, but when they do, every agency you can think of responds to the emergency. The Austin Police Department, the Austin Fire Department, and EMS arrive at Stephan House's neighborhood. Even federal agencies get involved, like the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, also known as the ATF. And by the time Interim Chief Manley arrives at the scene, the FBI is already there, collecting evidence. Again, explosions are really uncommon. So this wasn't a run-of-the-mill Friday for Austin police.
Well, it was very concerning, again, because that is not something that typically happens in any city, and again, not here in Austin to my memory, and a lot of thoughts. It's a bomb. What was the purpose of the bomb? Is it an individual act? Is it an intentional act? Is it part of a larger attack? There's so many questions that were unanswered. I remember driving to the scene, listening to all the radio traffic. We were getting more units responding, and we were setting up perimeters, putting up the tape to keep people back. And then, of course, arriving, it's trying to restore order to what was a very chaotic scene at that time.
ATF case agent Dan Mueller also joins the investigators on scene, and his morning started out a little different than Chief Manley's. Instead of answering emails, Mueller was at a local chain restaurant called Rudy's Barbecue, eating a breakfast taco. Then he gets a call about the explosion. He rushes to Stephan's home, and there's shrapnel everywhere.
It's kind of like if you gave your laptop to a 10-year-old with a hammer. The pieces will all still be there, but they'll be much smaller. And so, that's what I saw when I saw the blood and all the pieces was there's evidence right there. It was on the front porch. It was contained, and which enabled us to have a better collection.
Agent Mueller and his team of investigators crawl on their hands and knees through the grass in Stephan's front yard, collecting every piece of evidence they can find. They're looking for anything that can indicate what caused the explosion. In the early stages of an investigation of this scale, no detail is too small.
We're sending out, people canvassing the neighborhood for cameras. We're pairing up ATF agents and FBI agents to go knock on doors, asking if you saw anything, that kind of stuff. So right away, you start that process of gathering information, and we typically just are working together.
All these different agencies working on a scene, it can get a little frenzied. But the Austin Police Department takes the lead on the investigation, with help from the feds. The various agents swarming the scene have countless questions to answer. Do the neighbors know anything? What was the bomb made of? Was this an accident? What caused the explosion? What actually happened here?
To create violence by bombing is about as high order as you can go in regards to trying to cause mayhem or trying to hurt somebody. And so it's not common, and it's significant, and it takes a lot of planning and preparation to construct the device, plan it, activate it, or have it activated. So it's not like just getting mad at someone, grabbing a gun, and going after them.
One of the earliest theories is that the explosion could have been related to a drug bust in the neighborhood. One police officer on the scene mentions the narcotics team recently seized drugs in $324,000 just a couple doors down, at a house that looks extremely similar to Stephan's. They're both made of red brick, they're both one-story homes with two-car garages, and they both have dark-colored pickup trucks in the driveway. At this stage in the investigation, Agent Mueller thinks somebody could have targeted the house that got busted as revenge and simply mixed them up.
Sometimes people get really mad when their financial investment in narcotics is missing, if you will. And so that was one of the initial hypotheses is, hey, did someone try to exact revenge on the person at that house and just got the house wrong.
Here's FBI case agent Justin Wilson. He was one of the agents who worked the Olympic Park bombing in 1996. And now, more than 20 years later, he's on the scene of another bombing. He was the first federal agent to arrive on scene minutes after the explosion at Stephan's home. He found out about the explosion from a coworker.
And usually when the phone rings around 7 a.m, that's not a good sign. You're praying that your buddy's saying, "Hey, can you pick me up at the car shop so I can hop a ride into work or something?" But unfortunately, Scott called, and his first words were, "Where are you?" And that indicated, something bad's going on.
He sees someone walk out that other brick house, the site of the drug sweep, and walks over with Agent Mueller to interview him. He says the guy seemed nice.
But when you lose $250,000 of other people's money, they tend to have a little lesser nice look on about that, especially in a drug dealing business. So, ended up, as y'all probably already know, that ended up being a rabbit trail that wasn't the right one.
As local, state, and federal agents swarm the scene, Sean Phillips, the neighbor who called 911, returns from dropping off his kids at school. He still has Stephan's blood on his hands, on his clothes, but his priority is checking on Stephan's 8-year-old daughter. A neighbor has taken her in, and Sean rushes to the neighbor's house, ducking into a bathroom to clean up. He doesn't want Stephan's daughter to see her father's blood. She's calmed down since the explosion, and she sits a few rooms away, watching the cartoon show Captain Underpants and playing with the neighbor's baby. Everyone we talk to describes Stephan's daughter as extremely mature for her age. Here's Narelle Wainwood, a close family friend who refers to himself as Stephan's brother, talking about Stephan's daughter.
She was never discourteous. She was never rude. You know what I'm saying? She's just a little girl. That's it. The maturity. It's like, wait, what are you? You're 8. But she was there. She was fully there. She wasn't distracted. She wasn't off in the corner, just poor me. Big girl pants. Like personified. Honestly, she kind of lended a lot of strength to the family. Because everybody's trying to be strong for her. But she was intended to be strong for everyone else. Her character's going to be extremely tough and strong. You're not going to be able to break her. Because if that didn't break her at 8, you got a strong woman on your hands.
Stephan's wife, Shannon Johnson, is an elementary school teacher. Before the blast, she had already left for work. Sean realizes she has no idea what happened to her husband. Problem is, Sean doesn't know Shannon's phone number, and Stephan's daughter only knows how to call her by using a smart speaker. So Sean frantically searches online for contact information and leaves a panicked voicemail for Shannon at the school where she works. Sean tries to reach Shannon, and when she finally calls him back, she still doesn't know what happened. So Sean delivers the hardest news he's ever had to deliver. Stephan had been in a tragic accident. To this day, Stephan's loved ones don't understand why officials hadn't contacted them, why Shannon had to hear the news from Sean. Here's Narelle, Stephan's family friend and self-proclaimed brother, again.
That's the crazy part. Like, why wouldn't you say something? Like, that should be the first person you contact. Not just because it's an 8-year-old girl, not just because it's a husband, just because your house has been just blown up. Like, would you not think to call the other resident of the home? And the mother, who's also the wife?
What Sean doesn't know as he's on the phone with Shannon, what he and the rest of the city of Austin will soon find out, is that Shannon's husband, Anthony Stephan House, died in the hospital at 7:48 a.m., less than an hour after the bomb went off.
True crime lovers, get ready to uncover cold cases that you won't hear anywhere else. I'm excited to share with you another podcast that I know you'll love, The Fault Line. On each episode, The Fault Line digs deep into cold cases that have received little, if any, public attention, They focus on unsolved murders, unidentified persons, and disappearances, particularly those involving communities marginalized by mainstream media or investigation. Through expert interviews and long-form coverage of cases like those of the Millbrook twins, Raymond Green, Robert Martin, and Elia Banderas, The Fault Line takes you deep inside these cases and explores the cutting-edge science and technology that could help solve them. I recommend our listeners check out their episodes on the victims of Samuel Little, as well as their look into a little-known series of Atlanta serial killings, including the historical Atlanta Ripper to the Atlanta Lover's Lane murders. Both great series. If you love diving deep into unsolved cold cases, join the Fault Line on their quest to uncover these ignored stories. We really enjoy this podcast, and we think you will too. Check out The Fault Line on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
A devastating winter storm, millions without power, hundreds dead. How could this happen in the energy capital of America?
The market was killing people in their homes, and I had lost faith in it. And every decision we made at that point forward was to get the lights on.
I'm Mose Buchel. I'll be your host for The Disconnect, Power, Politics, and the Texas Blackout. Find it wherever you get your podcasts.
Most Americans believe freedom of religion is a right, even when your religion is a little unconventional.
I am the mystic mother of the Phoenix Goddess Temple.
But what happens when your beliefs,
sexuality can be sacred,
might be against the law?
Bam, 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 police.
Witnessed. Mystic Mother is available now. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts to binge all episodes or listen weekly wherever you get your podcasts.
With more intense floods, hurricanes, and fires bearing down on us relentlessly, more and more people are starting to wonder why exactly it's taken so long to act on climate. Drilled, a true crime podcast about climate change, tells that story. From the origins of climate denial to the century-long history of corporate propaganda, Drilled investigates all the various blockers to climate action. There are 7 narrative seasons for you to dig into so far, and in between those seasons, the show puts out weekly episodes to keep listeners up to date on climate news. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts.
Like this show and want to make your own? Let me tell you about Anchor. For starters, it's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. And now, you can even add any song from Spotify directly to your episodes. The possibilities are endless for what you can create, whether it's music analysis, your own radio show, or something the world's never heard before. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
After Shannon receives the news of her husband's death, she immediately calls Stephan's mother.
My name is Melanie House Dixon. I am the mother of Anthony Stephan House.
Melanie is a grandmother, but you can't tell by looking at her. She wears hip clothing, like cheetah print, and has short hair, cropped at her ears, with a highlighted bang going down the side of her face. Her voice is soft and sweet, but her presence is confident. When she speaks to you, she doesn't break eye contact once. Norelle calls her, quote, the embodiment of tough love.
When I think about Melanie, the word that comes to my mind is like matriarch. She's definitely a matriarch type.
Melanie's first son, Corey, died in 1994. Any parent will say their worst fear is losing their child, and now Melanie is living the unimaginable. She's going through it a second time. She's driving when she gets the call from Stephan's wife, Shannon.
I got a call from my daughter-in-law that said that Stephan was going to the hospital. And I'm saying, well, what going to the hospital for what? And she said, well, they didn't tell me. I said, well, what hospital is he going to? And they said the Round Rock. The Round Rock. I said, Round Rock? But we live in Pflugerville. And what scared me the most in this chill, my body just went numb, was when she said that she was told that he was barely breathing. And I'm saying, barely breathing from what? And I'm saying, what is going on? She couldn't tell me. So I dashed from taking my daughter to my great granddaughter to school over to the Round Rock Hospital. And when I get there, I'm saying, my son has been brought in here. Where is he? They're telling me, no, he hasn't been brought in. So I'm saying, but I was just told that he was brought here. So where's he was there. But because of the incident, they were not allowed to tell me or show me or to even acknowledge that he was there.
Melanie knows her son has been gravely injured. She knows investigators are currently swarming in and out of his house, trying to piece together what happened. But she doesn't know that her son was pronounced dead over an hour ago. She's on the phone with Stephan's wife when
there were cars, ambulance, FBI, police departments over at his house. And that's when they didn't know that I was on the phone. That is when one of the police officers told my daughter that that he was dead. That's when I heard it on the phone. The entire house, all I could do was just wail. And I'm saying, what happened?
Melanie sits in the hospital and listens as someone from Victim Services begins to explain what happened. That her son died. She fields phone calls from family members across the country. Everyone's wondering what happened, including Melanie. Stephan's family friend, Narelle Wainwood, is in New Mexico for work, but he jumps in his car and drives back to Texas immediately after Melanie calls him with the news.
And so we drove straight home. They dropped me off at home. I jumped in the car. I packed a few bags, jumped in the car, and was gone. She didn't know what was happening. She just know that something happened to Stephan. He's in the hospital. They won't let me see him.
You heard Narelle's deep voice. And he's tall, around 6'5". He has an eyebrow piercing with a chain trailing to his left earring, and it reflects his bold character well. He's an artist, and we interviewed him in his own boutique, where he sells custom-made masks, clothes, and accessories. Every time we talk to him, he's constantly cracking jokes. For someone who wasn't dealt the easiest cards in life, you can't see it in him. Narelle grew up in a foster home in Pflugerville, a suburb northeast of Austin. He became friends with Stephan's older brother, Corey. Narelle was 13 when he met Stephan, who was around the same age. They were classmates.
Stephan was, I could be a badass, but I'm going to kill you on these grades. And I'm going to kick your ass on any sport you want to play.
Narelle looked up to Stephan as he became a star athlete and a great runner. They spent time training together and grew inseparable. Narelle felt like a part of their family, and they considered him family too. Narelle often didn't have nice clothes because he was in foster care, so Stephan shared his clothes. Stephan took care of Narelle, and Narelle took care of him. They weren't related by blood, but they were brothers.
Yeah, we talk all day. And it's crazy because at that time, we really resembled each other a lot. And so people thought we were brothers that didn't know us, or were like, hey, that's your brother? And that knew him, or that knew only me. And so we just became brothers, like might as well. Like we're around each other all the time. Love you to death, you love me to death, your mom loves me, welcome me in the house, we resemble each other. That's my brother. He didn't care about what society told him he couldn't do. That was his inspiration. He was the type to overcome any obstacle. His tenacity was nuts. Like, I've never been addicted to winning as much until I met Stephan and seen how he hated to lose. And after that, it's like, whoa, I don't want to lose either.
Narelle lived with Stephan's family in high school. Then he reconnected with his biological mother and lived with her for a while in Abilene, Texas. That's where he was in April 1994, when he heard Stephan's older brother, Corey, had been murdered. After Corey died, Narelle returned to Austin to take care of Stephan and the House family. In the years that followed, he drifted in and out of Stephan's life physically, leaving for work occasionally and serving time in prison on a burglary charge. But the friends kept in touch. A lot of Stephan and Narelle's connection in adulthood was based around long phone calls. Narelle told us he will treasure the memories of those conversations forever. He also has 2 matching leather jackets. One's his and one's Stephan's. The matching jackets made them feel connected despite their miles apart. Narelle's jacket is fully intact, but Stephan's isn't. When the bomb detonated on Stephan's front porch, the inside of his home was mostly unaffected by the explosion. But the dining room window on the front side of the house shattered. Stephan's leather jacket hung on the back of a dining room chair, pierced by the shrapnel from the blast. When we interviewed Stephan's mother, Melanie, she talked about the values she wanted to instill in her son as he grew into a man. Since Stephan's death, she can see her son pass along those lessons to his daughter.
Being honorable, being true to yourself, because if you're true to yourself, then you can absolutely be true to someone else. Respect, and having empathy and sympathy for others. Education was one of the top of my list. I mean, because we are all entrepreneurs in our family, basically. Getting what you know, educating yourself, and then taking what you have and working for it for yourself.
Melanie taught Stephan that it was okay to have different opinions, as long as he can back them up.
He was very smart and he was very outspoken. And he wasn't outspoken to the point where it was in a negative kind of outspoken, but he would just speak his mind. He was a vast reader.
Stephan majored in finance at Texas State University, and he wanted to become a broker. He managed several construction sites around Austin. He always liked keeping himself busy, starting and stopping new side projects, but he'd almost always finish them. One of the projects was working with Melanie to renovate her home in East Austin. She finds beauty in almost everything, and it's obvious by the way she decorates. When you walk into her house, you're greeted by a bright living room surrounded by windows. Along the fireplace mantel and shelves, she showcases artifacts collected from her travels to Africa. There's a grandfather clock in the corner that chimes every 15 minutes. It's unlike the other pieces, but it dominates the space with its presence. The beating heart of the home Stephan helped build.
It was a whole new design. We built walls in that were not there. We filled in. We just redesigned the entire center part of this house, and I miss that. Put in new baseboards. I filled the walls. I mean, he just helped with everything. I design sometimes, and he paints. So, but we have that history in our background. You know, his dad is in construction, so he grew up in a construction environment.
Hi, I'm Aurora, the host of the Drag's newest podcast, Planet Texas, a 5-part series about climate change in Texas. Now, you might be thinking, climate change? That sounds like a huge bummer. I'm just here for more cheerful stuff, like true crime. But I promise you this isn't a show to fuel your sense of doom. It's about how regular people are fighting back against climate change in their own backyards and finding hope for the future. Planet Texas can be found wherever you get your podcasts starting Tuesday, September 13th. I'll see you there.
It's now the afternoon of March 2nd. Interim Chief Manley stands under an overcast sky in the middle of Haverford Drive. He's wearing an all-black police uniform with stars on his collar and badges on each shoulder. There are 2 agents standing on each side of Manley, wearing khakis under coats with yellow letters. FBI on one, ATF on another. Police cars and emergency vehicles line both sides of the curb behind them, and reporters gather in front of them, eager for answers. He shuffles a yellow legal pad in his hands as he waits for reporters to set up their mics. He says the bombing seems like an isolated incident, with no real reason to believe it's an act of terrorism, or that there's any cause for alarm.
Based on what we know right now, we have no reason to believe this is anything beyond an isolated incident that took place at this residence, and no reason to believe that this is in any way linked to a terrorist act.
This brings some relief, but it's only been a few hours. The investigation team is still searching for the cause of the explosion.
That, again, in an abundance of caution, trying to understand this, we reach out to all of our providers that deliver mail in this area, both the U.S. Postal Service and those that do it privately, because that is one of the things we want to know is, was there a package delivered to this residence in the past several days? Because we still are trying to work to understand what happened, what the device was, and where it came from.
Following that press briefing, not much happens in the investigation. 3 days pass, and no more bombs are reported in Austin. So the police decide to have another press conference. This time, it's more formal. Assistant Police Chief Joseph Chacon will lead it this time at the Austin Police Headquarters. Investigators now know the explosive device was a package, but they still don't know much else.
I think what's important to talk about today is that anytime we have a bomb go off like that and somebody dies, the first thing that people think is terrorism. While we cannot completely rule it out at this point, we do not believe that terrorism is an incident at this point.
So they're not calling it terrorism, and they can't call it a homicide either. Here's Assistant Chief Chacon at that press conference explaining why.
So we cannot rule out that the intent, it's just too early right now to figure out. Obviously, it was intended to harm somebody, but we can't rule out that Mr. House didn't construct this himself and then accidentally detonate it, in which case it would be an accidental death.
The cause of the bombing isn't clear to the public. Investigators can't get their story straight, and the victim's family doesn't know much more either. Here's Stephan's mother, Melanie, again.
When it happened on that Friday, that whole weekend until that Monday was horrible. That much I remember. I remember just not sleeping. I remember wanting to know what's going on. I remember talking to, we had a person from APD that was kind of over our case. And so I remember trying to call them, not being able to get into anyone, not being able to talk to anyone, leaving messages. So if you ask me how I felt, I was a basket case. Emotionally and physically, from not sleeping, not eating for 3 days.
Melanie doesn't know police are considering the possibility that her son had created the bomb himself. She won't know until she hears Assistant Chief Chacon mention it at the press conference.
We found out about it like everyone else did, watching the 6 o'clock news. It was on the 6 o'clock news.
In fact, she's barely heard from investigators at all. And Melanie isn't pleased that investigators are speculating to the media.
I don't know how I felt. I was emotionally wiped out. I don't know. I was just existing. I was doing things and saying things. I don't even know what I was. I can't even tell you. If I look back now, I can't tell you what I did. I was just going through the motions. I can't articulate anything that I did. I was just kind of following orders and trying to figure out, why did all this happen? I can't remember.
Investigators still don't know what happened. They've announced a $10,000 reward for any information about the incident. Here's Narelle. He's insulted by the reward amount.
The crazy part about that is how your life means so little that they choose revenue over you. It really wasn't a slap to the face for me, because I'm from the bottoms, so I know how people feel about the bottoms. And to a lot of people, black people are the bottoms.
A young man in Pflugerville, a suburb northeast of Austin, attends a birthday party at his pastor's house the night of the bomb that killed Stephan. He grew up going to the non-denominational Austin Stone Community Church every Sunday. Now, 23 years old, he's a devout atheist, but he still attends Bible study every week to debate with other attendants and challenge them to prove their faith. He's the only one who knows what's about to come. Next, on Season 2 of Darkness.
Oh, I need a EMS, please. Okay, hold on. Anyone we got blood. Something exploded.
I said, look, let's follow the facts. What do we have? We have 2 people that are dead in a close proximity, east of I-35 in East Austin. And that's what we have. But nobody really wanted to say that. They kept saying, well, we don't know yet.
We were looking at terrorism just because, quite frankly, that's the only thing that made sense.
Season 2 of Darkness is reported, hosted, written, and directed by me, Ashley Miznazzi. This podcast is presented by The Drag, a student-run audio production house at the University of Texas at Austin's Moody College of Communication. Katie Penchik-Outka and Robert Quigley are the executive producers. This podcast was also reported and written by Kenny Jones. The editor is Katie Penchik-Outka. The associate producers are Austin Cheatham, Libby Cohen, Alexandra Curry-Buckner, Cecilia Garzella, Gregory Gonzalez, Anastasia Goodwin, Jake Herman, Jackie Ybarra, Marian Navarro, Ileana Rowland, Sarah Schleid, Aiden Snasdell, and Harrison Young. The artwork was created by Helen Holsey. Christian McDonald is the Drag's technical director. A huge thank you to Leslie Schrock for all of her support and guidance. I also want to thank Jay Bernhardt, Kathleen McElroy, Rachel Davis-Mercy, Allison Dawson, Kathleen Mabley, Emily Quigley, Jay Whitman, Eric Tang, Robert Vilwalk, and Ryan Outka. Special thanks to Grace Spees, Marcus Crum, Raul Garcia, Dylan Lee, Jennifer Robbins, Tasha Turner, Amanda Cisneros, Jenny Nelson Gray, and Tiffany Ma. The Drag is a nonprofit educational organization that is made possible by donors like you. Please support our work by going to thedragaudio.com/donate. Every dollar goes directly to producing more content like this while giving students an amazing educational experience. Thank you.